So we're continuing our discussion of the derivative operator, and we wrote it down as k is minus I, the derivative of the Dirac delta function. Okay, and where we left off last, we're playing around with the fact that k is a Hermitian operator, and we looked at the product of two vectors, f and g, where k operates on f, and then we take the product with g. So if we write this out now, what will we get? Well, we would get a product. We could actually get two integrals. So the first is we would look at how g is written on the x basis. And how x prime, or f, is written in the x prime basis. And then we integrate over dx, dx prime. So we've broken it down into two spaces, x and x prime, and we see how our functions g and f are made up of those bases, x and x prime. Okay, so in this case, gx is just the function g of x, but it's a complex conjugate, and x prime f is our function f of x prime, and we're last but not least, we get this matrix element of k x prime, which we can write down now as minus I, the Dirac delta function, the derivative in the x prime space. Okay, so now let's put all that, now that everything's written as functions, let's put it into the integrals, and what we have is integrals of g star minus I Dirac delta function x minus x prime, the derivative of x prime of f in the x prime space, dx dx prime. So now we just have to take that, we do that. We take this function. Now if we integrate over all x prime, right, that means we can use the Dirac delta function to change the derivative of f as a function of x prime into a derivative as a function of f. And there's a minus I, so don't want to forget that. Now we have the entire thing written in the space of x. So when I integrated over x prime, so now everything is written as a function of x. And if we integrate by parts, so let's integrate by parts, what do we get? We get minus I g star x f of x evaluated from a to b plus I, the integral a to b, the derivative of g star times the function f. If we now compare this to what we had when we started, we had an integral, a double integral, and if we then take the complex conjugate of it, then everything switches around. So I'm going to take the complex conjugate of that whole thing, and that switches all my x's and x primes. And so since k is Hermitian, I don't have to worry about the complex conjugate of that. And so in the end, what we have is, in this integral's case, we have the integral first integrating over x, or I'm sorry, integrating over integrating over x, we would get, oh, but I'm sorry. So when we operate with k, we would get the Dirac delta function, which then I can integrate over x prime. And when I do that, I get this function of x. Like so. And then integrating that, no, and then I can, then I can just pull the complex conjugate in. I would get a positive I. I would change f to, from its complex conjugate, and then I would change the derivative, g, to its complex conjugate, like so. And I'm essentially back to where I was before. So what do I have? What does that mean? Well, if I compare these two results, so this one was where we took the complex conjugate and then solved the integral and then eventually added the complex conjugate back in. So what did we get? We essentially doing either way, what we find is that this part essentially drops out. That first part of the integration by parts should be zero. Should be zero. Why should it be zero? Because when we took the, so I should have gotten a complex conjugate of f and g, but instead it survived, and so we have to set that one to zero. Only in the case where k is a Hermitian operator. So what we see now is that, so what we have to look at now is this result. This result of what's happening to our function at both a and b. And so if we think about it, if we think about this as, say, a wave or a string, then what we're putting the condition on it that the wave has to be at zero at the endpoints. So if I have a string right here, which is oscillating between the two, that at these endpoints here, A and B, that wave has to be zero. I have to have a zero at these points, or essentially the wave has to terminate at those 2 points. It can't be a case where I have a string tied to a hoop and then the string is allowed to slide up and down on the pole. Instead, we have to tie down those two. So in the end, what we have then is when we evaluate these functions, that this function, when x is equal to a, and when x is equal to, when x is equal to a and x is equal to b, the functions have to go to zero. And so another way you can look at it is if you looked at it in spherical coordinates, what we would say is that we have a periodic function where this function of some angle phi is going to be equal to that same function plus 2 pi. So if I was to draw this out in spherical coordinates, so this is my angle phi, this is my angle theta, and this is the length r. And essentially, when I rotate all the way around the circle and get back to where I am, it has to be equal. It has to be the same. So this is true if I have a string stretched out. I have to terminate the wave at the ends, or if I have a closed loop, then the wave has to be on the closed loop. And so, therefore, what we're finding is that this new condition that the wave has to terminate, or it has to be a periodic function. So why is that important? Well, it's important because eventually what we're going to find is these functions we're talking about, f and g, are going to be something called the wave functions. And those wave functions are going to be related to the probability of doing an experiment, the probability of getting a result from an experiment. And so if I have now we don't want the probability at the endpoints to explode out to infinity. So we want a fixed range with which to integrate over. And so we sum up all the probabilities inside that range. It should be finite. Actually, it should be 1. The probability of being inside this range is 1. And if we don't terminate the wave function at the endpoints, then instead it's going to explode. And then we'll get an unrealistic answer or a probability that's greater than 1. The same thing is true in this spherical case. We want it to be periodic because we don't want any discontinuity in the function. We want the wave function to be a nice stable function that we can use to calculate the probabilities of a certain outcome in our experiment. So therefore, we put this condition on, and so if our wave function is a wave, and if we say this wave has a shape of, I don't know, say e to the I kx, where k is related to the wavelength, it's actually called the wave number, then what we're going to find is that when we integrate, when we evaluate this wave at the endpoints of, say, something like as x goes to infinity, then if we look back at our functions, we have I e to the I kx, complex conjugate e to the I k prime x. And if I evaluate that at minus infinity to infinity, then I want this thing to go to 0. So therefore, I have to have this condition where if I put this together, k minus k prime x, in order to satisfy this condition, k should equal k prime. So anyway, so we just have to set it up such that even if we're going to go all the way out to infinity, that we have to set boundary conditions in order for the wave function to be 0 at those endpoints.